Hello everyone, it's me, Nikki, and today we have another Let's Talk About. And this time we're going to talk about Jack the Ripper. Ooh. It's not totally bookish, but there are books on Jack the Ripper, so my channel, whatever. I actually do not know when I got interested. I was going to say into. I'm not into Jack the Ripper. I am interested in Jack the Ripper. I think it's a fascinating case. Obviously, horribly murdered women. But, like, he just does that to the last woman. And then nothing more. And you're like, what the fuck? That's why there's all those conspiracies, because what happened to her was the worst. It also has, like, it talks, like, a lot of these books talk about, not only the who could the killer be, but also, like, why those women, etc., etc. So the canonical five are Marianne Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly, who got the absolute worst of it. I mean, it was disgusting. And so the first book I have, I will not show you the pictures. They are out there if you want to see them. This is by Donald Rumbelow, who is considered he is a ripperologist, but he's like one of the ripperologists. And I really enjoyed this book a lot. It talked about the crimes and it talked about the women, so that was great. I do want to read the 5, which talks about just the women. So that is on my to-buy list. And I liked this because it gave a good detail of the suspects. There's like a whole chapter devoted to them. But it also talked about how there were some, like before Marianne Nichols, there were some women, I believe prostitutes, or low income women in the area who had been stabbed randomly. And it was almost like the Ripper was working up to what he did. Like, you don't just start doing that. Like, we know that now. This is also a really fascinating, the whole Ripper case is really fascinating, like seeing how crime forensics and getting like into the mind of a criminal has changed, because you don't just start like killing women and taking their kidneys and cutting off their ears or whatever, right? You don't just start doing that. Like, we know now that psychopaths and sociopaths tend to start with animals, or they start with like other kids, you know, and they just so that's why they think those stabbings were related to the Ripper. There were also some other bodies found that could be related to the Ripper. Nobody's sure about that. It also brings up, there's the double event with Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes, and or was it Annie and... No, it was Elizabeth and Catherine, I believe. That whoever went after Elizabeth Stride might not have been the Ripper, because like where they found Elizabeth and where they found Catherine was pretty far away, and there were like, at this time the police were patrolling all over. So David Rumbelow makes the point that he would have had to, you know, move pretty fucking fast, because there's even a map, I think, somewhere of how the cops moved, and he was like, I don't know. And Elizabeth, I believe her throat was just cut. Yeah, she'd just been murdered by a slash of her neck, and the rest of her body was undisturbed, when the Ripper already had the MO of cutting the neck and then, like, dissecting the women. But because it was on the same day, he believes that somebody just used the Ripper to kill her, and then it got bundled up with the Ripper. Other people think that the killer was disturbed, which is possible, when killing her, and just found somebody else, Catherine. But I also like this theory. And then Mary Jane Kelly, as we know, was pretty bad. What else goes on in this book? Like, all the suspects are in here. And they talk about they've got pictures of this is the From Hell letter. I don't know if you can see that. So yeah. And my favorite one, because I thought anybody who was a murderer was Jack. Like, there was a guy who was playing Jekyll and Hyde, and he was such a good actor. People were like, oh, he's definitely Jack the Ripper, because he can just turn on a dime. And I'm like, he's an actor. And then this is the other book, Jack the Ripper, The Suspects, by the Whitechapel Society. Let's see if I can find, this is my favorite, as I like to say. And the Whitechapel Society has a bunch of links that you can, like, look up and stuff. Do they have... Okay. They talk about... Oh, this guy. This one is my favorite. George Chapman, no relation. And he was really called Severin Kowalski. He was a convicted killer, hung in 1903 following the murders of 3 women. And George Aberline thought that he got the Ripper. Okay. I understand that, like, criminology was in its infancy around this time. George Chapman poisoned his wives. Okay? And they thought he was the Ripper. Those are 2 different MOs. He poisoned his wives. The Ripper mutilated lower class women that he could get access to. Prostitutes. And I'm like, I don't even know if then how those 2 things connected. Because poison is a whole other ballgame than stabbing someone and dissecting them and, like, taking out their kidney. So I was very confused about that. And that's why I always thought that the Ripper was, like, a doctor. I've heard a butcher theory, because butchers and doctors could just walk around with blood and it would be fine. I've also heard a midwife theory, like Jack the Ripper was a woman, because midwives could walk around in blood. But female serial killers are very rare, and female serial killers who mutilate their victims are even rarer. So it was probably unlikely a woman, but it's still a good theory. There's another one. There's, of course, the doctor for the queen or whatever. I don't believe in that stuff. There was a guy whose name I don't remember, who was in and out of, like, insane asylums, and they were like, oh yeah, it's definitely him. But I think he was in an asylum on a couple of the murders. Patricia Cornwall, the author, thinks it was Walter Sickert, who was a painter. because he was in the area. I don't even know if there's anything beyond that. I can't remember. And there's this guy, doctor in quotes. So any guy could have been like a doctor, quote unquote. Of course, Prince Albert Victor, like, I doubt it. There were a couple that were like pretty out there. I think some people think H.H. Holmes was Ripper, and I'm like, no, he killed his victims in a completely different way. So if you're interested, I would definitely pick up these two books and the 5. I don't know who the Ripper is. Some of the suspects do sound good, but some of them are like, really? Like George Chapman. It was not George Chapman. He did murder people, but he poisoned them. I think whoever it was someone who, after killing Mary Jane Kelly, either somehow was murdered, killed himself or herself, probably himself, or was arrested and put somewhere where he couldn't hurt anybody. Because what he did to her was gruesome. I don't understand how you can just, like, we now know that those kinds of things are like a compulsion, an obsession to them. And doing that, I don't see how you could just stop, There was somebody else who was a suspect who kept on living after Mary Jane Kelly, and I'm like, you can't just stop. That doesn't seem like something you can just stop doing. But, we know that now because of how psychology and everything has has evolved. So, yeah, but if you're interested in Jack the Ripper, I would get this one. It's very good, detailed about, I don't think it's all the suspects, but it's probably the most famous ones. They even have at the end the best or worst of the rest. So like they're all covered in here. And then I would also check this out. And the 5. I'm recommending the 5 just because I think I've seen other people say this. It's important to focus on the victims as well as the killer. I specifically would say that about modern, like, fuck the modern serial killers. They don't deserve books or TV shows about them. Their victims do. But I see why Jack the Ripper is so sort of overshadows his victims because they don't know who he is. They always go, oh, we know who he is. I'm like, nobody really wants to find out who he is because that would, like, ruin the whole thing, I think. So, did I even explain what he did? He murdered 5 prostitutes in, like, a year. They were very close together. I just figured everybody knows what Jack the Ripper did. He's not around anymore. And this one also talks about not just the stabbings, but also the other bodies they found that might be Ripper victims before he got into dissection. So it's very good. These two are very, very good books. And I would like more. I know there's a book out there that actually talks about not Jack, but the society and basically how Jack, like, if he killed those other people before Marianne Nichols, how he could get away with it. And I think he only got attention because he basically killed them all in about a year. Like, they were like almost back to back to back. So, or it was pretty close. Especially the double event. Yeah. So, that's it for this one. This probably should have been a Halloween episode, but oh well. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're having a good post-Christmas, and I hope you're having a great day. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.